Hey, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores. I'm coming to y'all today with a big practice squad update. All of the signings that we've made so far, I say so far because we've signed 15 players to the practice squad. You're allowed 16, and there's a lot of things to break down as far as that goes. It's not just, oh, we signed 15 guys. Of course, I want to break down some of the guys we signed and why I'm happy we brought a few of them back, and then also talk about some of the guys that may not make it back, may get scooped up by other teams, but also there's a lot of strategy here. There's a reason there's that last slot open right now. Some technicalities, some ways to finesse some contracts. It's crazy. And then also, of course, we got to dive into this Benardrick McKinney and KJ Wright debate. The Zach Cunningham situation is interesting, and I definitely feel like out of the three linebackers, Benardrick McKinney, KJ Wright, Zach Cunningham, I do feel like Zach Cunningham is the better of the three linebackers, but you would have to trade for him. So I'm not going to discuss that situation because it's way easier to just go grab a KJ Wright or a Benardrick McKinney. So we're going to break down the differences between those two, which I prefer and why. But before we dive into that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get a notification immediately. And every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Like I said, these next 2 weeks for the Burgundy and Gold are going to be pretty quiet. We may get some injury updates, but we're no longer getting those daily training camp updates of who did well, who played poorly, all of that type of stuff. So Street Scores will keep y'all busy with all of the content I'm coming out with. Film sessions for some more rookies before we get to this Chargers game. We got to get these fantasy leagues done, and I'm going to keep y'all updated on any piece of information we get like today. But without further ado, let's get it. All right, so starting with the practice squad, as of right now, we've signed 15 players with 16 available slots. We have running back Peyton Barber, wide receiver Antonio Gandy Golden, who's on the screen right now, center Keith Ishmael, guard Wes Martin, offensive tackle David Steinmetz, offensive lineman Bo Benchwile, and offensive lineman John Todd, defensive end Daniel Wise, and defensive end Bunmi Rotimi, defensive lineman Gabe Wright and William Bradley King, linebackers Jordan Kunajik and Jared Norris, cornerback Danny Johnson, and safety Jeremy Reeves. And there's a few standout names there that I'm super excited we got back. My top ones are easily wide receiver Antonio Gandy Golden, again, who you see on the screen, defensive end Daniel Wise, defensive lineman William Bradley King, and also safety Jeremy Reeves. I was really happy about us being able to get those guys back. I was definitely afraid of another team signing them. Nobody did. Nobody claimed them off of waivers. We were able to scoop them back up. And you never know. There may be times, whether it be due to injury or if they look really good in practice, that we elevate those guys to take the spot of somebody else. Right now, we have the dependable veteran guys when it comes to certain positions, especially secondary. We went Darryl Roberts, Bobby McCain over a Jeremy Reeves. You could say Jeremy Reeves has the higher ceiling. As of right now, Darryl Roberts and Bobby McCain are definitely more dependable. If there's an injury or if Jeremy Reeves starts to really develop and they notice it in practice, then maybe they release one of those other guys and elevate Jeremy Reeves to be our pure free safety. And Antonio Gandy Golden is big because right now with the receiving group, we kept 7, keeping DeAndre Carter and Dax Milne. Dax Milne is our future slot, our franchise guy at the slot position once Adam Humphries leaves. I'm just assuming. It's been reported that's how they view him. And he's also a pretty decent returner. And DeAndre Carter is mainly here for his return ability. So if somebody else steps up at returner, like a Dax Milne, maybe even a Jared Patterson, that can take over the punt duties, can be as dependable and as explosive as a DeAndre Carter, or at least get close to it, DeAndre Carter may end up getting dropped from the 53-man roster, and maybe you elevate an Antonio Gandy Golden, who, even after releasing them yesterday, Ron Rivera couldn't stop talking about how hard it was to release Antonio Gandy Golden. They believe in his potential. He's made strides. They just felt like he's still not ready enough. But just like Jeremy Reeves, if he's out there balling in practice, and again, if we find a really good returner in one of these other guys like Dax Milne or Jared Patterson, then DeAndre Carter could be on the way out and Antonio Gandy Golden could be coming up to take his place as a red zone threat. It's obvious with the receiving group that they clearly leaned on speed. Right now, Cam Sims and our tight end group are really our only possession receivers, our red zone threats, the guys you can just throw it up and they make a contested catch in the end zone. Everybody else is basically just speed, speed, speed. They wanted to make this team faster on defense and offense, and they clearly showed that with this receiving group. Also, the fact that Jared Norris made it to the practice squad, that's another special teams guy right there, that if there's an injury to another special teams guy, maybe like a Trey Apke, you bring in Jared Norris. And Rivera also said that he did want to keep quite a bit of offensive linemen on the practice squad just in case of their injuries, and they did that as well. And it's really interesting too, because this year coming up, you can actually have 9 offensive linemen active on game days. We already have all of those offensive linemen on our roster. Some teams kept 10 offensive linemen on their 53-man roster. Some of them, I believe, may have kept 11. We only kept 9 because of positional flex, and all of those 9 will actually be active on game days. Most position groups, everybody will not be active for game days. There's a limit to how many players you can have active during the game. So even though they're on the 53-man roster, doesn't mean they're guaranteed to play at all. But with our offensive line, we only kept 9. You're allowed to have 9 active on game days. And so that's why they have these other guys on the practice squad, because if there's an injury, you have a guy ready, immediately accessible in your practice squad that you can elevate to the 53-man roster to step up. And then again, I also like the fact that we were able to keep Daniel Wise and William Bradley King. I think William Bradley King has a lot of potential. He made a lot of plays throughout training camp practices and in the preseason. He was out here getting strip sacks in the preseason. And then Daniel Wise was impressing a lot as well. Really, a lot of defensive linemen were impressing. Gabe Wright and Rutimi looked good as well at times in the preseason. But Daniel Wise and William Bradley King are definitely some standouts that didn't make the 53-man roster out of the defensive line group. And then it's also, of course, pretty interesting that we were able to bring back Peyton Barber to the practice squad just in case if there's an injury. And then you also have Danny Johnson, who's a corner, but also has some return capabilities as well, if we just have to dive that deep into our returner bag. And just to let you know, Jimmy Moreland was moved to IR because he was waived as an injury designation, but that's just procedural. Do not expect him to come back to this team, because honestly, if he reaches an injury settlement, which is more than likely going to happen with this team, I definitely feel like he's more than likely going to get picked up by another team. There's too many teams out here that need secondary help, especially somebody to the talent of a Jimmy Moreland. So I highly doubt he comes back to this team, practice squad or whatever. Technically, as of right now, he's on our injured reserve, but he's not going to stay there long. He's not going to stay in the burgundy and gold long either. But now this is where things get really interesting. Like I alluded to earlier before the intro, we have 15 out of 16 practice squad spots filled. We're potentially leaving that last spot open for a reason. Remember, we only have 4 linebackers on our 53-man roster right now, which is weird in several ways. I think we're already going to go heavy sub packages, and maybe Landon Collins is technically your 5th linebacker at the end of the day. We're going to be out there with 2 actual off-ball linebackers the majority of the time anyway. But there's also some interesting strategy here, because I'm not sure if many of y'all know, but if a vested veteran is on your 53-man roster for week 1, his salary becomes guaranteed. So to get around this, teams may sign a particular vet to the practice squad for week 1, then elevate them on game day, and then sign them to the 53 week 2. And that could be what the Washington football team may do with David Mayo, the linebacker that we brought over from Carolina. You already know Rivera and company like him a lot. And as of right now, if you were to add him to our 53-man roster, he's our only certified run stopper. Like the only guy that you know for a fact, this 3rd and 1, we need to stop the opposing team from getting that 1 yard. David Mayo, out of everybody on our roster right now, is the most dependable guy to make that happen, honestly. A lot of our guys are coverage guys that are currently on the roster right now at linebacker. And then John Bostic is just the brains of the defense. He's not a good run stopper. He's not a good coverage guy either. So David Mayo definitely has a niche for this team. And they may just pull off that strategy right there to avoid having to pay him more money. So don't be surprised if David Mayo ends up playing for us against the Chargers, even though he's not even on our 53-man roster or our practice squad as of right now, for those reasons right there. And then, of course, if we were to bring on David Mayo, we would have to cut somebody else on the team. I'm assuming it'd probably be one of those receivers, maybe like a Dax Milne, because again, like I said, DeAndre Carter is a certified punt returner. Dax Milne is a pretty decent backup punt returner right now. I feel like he has the potential to become a good one as well. But you don't necessarily need a Dax Milne. You already have Adam Humphries, Terry McLaurin, De'Ami Brown, Curtis Samuel, all can play in the slot. Also, Dax Milne was our very last draft pick in the draft, and I definitely feel like he hasn't done enough in preseason for another team to want to take him off of our practice squad. So if we were to take him from the 53-man roster and place him on our practice squad so we can bring up a David Mayo, I feel like strategy-wise, that would be the smartest idea, because again, I don't think there are teams out there fighting to get a Dax Milne. I think he would sit firmly on our practice squad, and so we're ready to elevate him back to the 53-man roster. Man, it's really chess, not checkers out here, bro. It's crazy. So again, don't be surprised if David Mayo ends up being on our 53-man roster by the time we play the Chargers. It's a lot of moving pieces right now, and we're going to talk about Benardrick McKinney and KJ Wright later. But even just beyond those two, there may still be some roster moves coming before we get to that Chargers game. Just because guys made the 53-man roster yesterday, today, does not mean they'll be there by the time we play the Chargers almost 2 weeks from now. I mean, 4 linebackers on a 53-man roster is really unheard of, especially for a team that technically runs a 4-3 base defense. Granted, I believe we're going to be in the nickel a lot anyway. First of all, you want to have Cameron Curl and Landon Collins on the field at the same time anyway, and I like Cameron Curl a lot, but I don't see him as a true free safety at all. I feel like that's one of his biggest weaknesses. I feel like he definitely does not have enough range to do that, just to be just up there by himself. Maybe cover 2, and I could definitely see him playing some cover 3, cover 4, but like cover 1, definitely not. Cover 2 is kind of a stretch. So if you want Cameron Curl and Landon Collins on the field at the same time, you'll need a free safety with them, which would take away from the linebacker group anyway. You wouldn't be able to have 3 linebackers and Cameron Curl, Landon Collins, and Bobby McCain. Also, even beyond that, you'll need to take a linebacker away from a formation if you want to have Cameron Curl, Benjamin St-Juste, and William Jackson on the field at the same time. So again, I think we're going to play a lot of nickel, a lot of dime anyway. We're only going to have 2 linebackers on the field the majority of the time. But still, 4 linebackers on your 53-man roster is still crazy, even with us potentially running 2 linebackers the majority of snaps. And then we're talking about running this 5-2-4 defense. That's another reason we're probably going to only have 2 linebackers on the field a lot of the time anyway. So this is going to be really interesting. And it's also been reported by Kyle Stackpole that we did put in a waiver claim for at least 1 linebacker that was available, but he got scooped up by another team that had a higher waiver priority than us. Remember, we have a waiver priority of 13, so one of those top 12 waiver priority teams was able to scoop up one of those linebackers that we tried to make a claim for. Haven't gotten a report on who it was, but that's interesting to know that we tried to get somebody, we just didn't land them.